Today, we're diving into a really profound question, one that's right at the heart of the Catholic Church. What happens when your own deep, personal love clashes with centuries of official rules? We're going to explore the whole conversation around same-sex couples and what could be a new path to marriage in the Church. It's a topic that's, well, theologically complex, but also incredibly human.
Just listen to these words for a second, spoken by a priest in a confessional, that sacred private space. They just got right to the core of this whole conflict. It's this moment of beautiful pastoral care that's kind of standing in direct opposition to the official line. And this, right here, is where our story really begins.
So the source material paints this really powerful picture. Imagine a devout woman, someone who loves her faith, and she's in a loving, committed relationship with another woman. She goes to confession and she's completely torn. Her heart is telling her this love is a gift from God, but her church is telling her it's a grave offense. See, this isn't just some abstract debate. It's a painful, real-life dilemma for so many people. Okay, so where does this big institutional no even come from? If we want to understand the new path forward, we first have to get a handle on the thinking that led to exclusion in the first place. And it's all built on a very specific idea about nature and morality. The key concept, the bedrock of Catholic sexual teaching for centuries, is something called natural law. Now, the traditional argument goes something like this. Since making babies is a natural result of sex between a man and a woman, that must be its only God-given purpose. And from that, they conclude that any other kind of sexuality is unnatural and, well, outside of God's plan. And this right here, this is the final result of that whole framework. The official catechism, which is based on that natural law argument, is crystal clear. It says that same-sex relationships, it doesn't matter how loving or how committed they are fundamentally disordered. This is the wall the couples are up against. But what if the entire framework for how we understand God's grace is flawed? And this is where things get really interesting. In response to that old model, a new way of thinking is starting to emerge, and it challenges the old way at its very core. It's called unauthorized grace, and believe me, it's a pretty radical shift in how we think about where we find God in our lives. Okay, now check out this contrast. It's fascinating. The old model, let's call it administered grace, sees grace like it's a resource, something the church controls and hands out from the top down, almost like a prize for following the rules. But unauthorized grace completely flips the script. It says grace isn't top down at all, it's bottom up. It bubbles up from our actual lived experiences, from love, from trust, from real responsibility. So, the most important point is this. Unauthorized grace means God is already present, already active in a loving relationship before the church even shows up. The grace isn't made by a priest or a ceremony, it's already there, living inside the love and the faithfulness that two people share. The church, in this view, doesn't have a monopoly on God's grace. Now you can imagine, this idea has huge implications for how we think about sacraments, especially marriage. I mean, if grace is already in the relationship itself, what does that mean for the wedding ceremony? Well, it totally redefines what the church is even doing there.
This is the logical next step, and honestly, for a lot of folks, it's a mind-blowing one. In Catholic theology, the people who actually perform the sacrament of marriage, it's not the priest or the deacon, it's the couple themselves. They are the ministers of the sacrament to each other when they make their vows. The priest is officially just the church's witness.
And that leads us to this new term, public ecclesial sacramentalization. I know, it's a mouthful, but the idea is actually really simple. The church isn't making something holy that was unholy before. No. Instead, the whole community is getting together to publicly witness, to celebrate, and to say yes to the holy, sacramental love that God has already brought to life in that couple. The ceremony doesn't create the sacrament, it just recognizes it. Okay, so we've talked a lot of theology. How does all this abstract stuff actually create a real, concrete path for same-sex couples to get married at the altar? Well, it provides a really solid set of arguments for why the church not only can celebrate these marriages, but maybe even should. Let's just break this down. We've already covered that the couple are the ministers, right? And that their love already has this sacramental quality. On top of that, there's the sensus fidelium, which basically means the collective gut feeling of the people in the pews, and that feeling is more and more rejecting these old rules. So the argument is, the church's real job is to witness God's work, not to block it. In fact, denying a public celebration of a grace that's so obviously there, well, it actually hurts the credibility of all the sacraments. And hey, this isn't just theory. In Germany, there was a movement called #Liebe gewinnt, which means love wins, where over 100 parishes openly defied the Vatican and held blessing ceremonies for same-sex couples. It was this amazing real-world explosion of this theology, all driven by priests and churchgoers who just felt in their conscience that they had to celebrate the grace they were seeing. So what does this all add up to? When you put all the pieces together, it points to a really fundamental shift in the Church's identity. From being a gatekeeper of God's rewards to becoming a community that actively looks for and celebrates grace wherever it pops up.
At the end of the day, this whole paradigm of unauthorized grace is really a call for humility. It suggests the Church's job isn't to be some kind of cosmic bureaucracy, stamping forms to approve or deny God's love. Instead, its job is just to bear witness, to point to the love and goodness it sees in the world and say, hey, look what God is doing right here.
And that leaves us with one last, really powerful question. If God's grace is truly a free, wild gift that grows in the real experience of love before any ritual, outside of any institution's control, then who, really, has the authority to stand in its way? It's a question that challenges the very foundation of exclusion.